Hank Neuberger, and we're here in my home outside Chicago. And I've been in the production and engineering and audio side of artist recording and music recording for probably 30 years now, since I got out of school. I started pretty audio-centric, but right now I have a production company called Third Wave Productions. So I manage recording studios, I record and mix, but primarily today I've moved my focus over to music television and music webcast production, and still very music-centric, but a little more video production-oriented than where I started 30 years ago. I started out of school in a recording studio called Zenith DB that at the time, and like most people in our business even today, I started as an intern for no compensation at all, and they were a post-production studio that did audio for 16mm television and film production. There was a show that some people might remember called Marlon Perkins' Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, and this was a big naturalist show where they would shoot film in Africa and South America, wild animal stuff, and then come back and Marlon would narrate it, and they would shoot all that MOS, which is without any sound, so all the soundtracks and all the audio was created in this studio in Chicago. And I found a way to get into that studio right out of college. From there I was able to move to what was at the time the top music recording studio in Chicago, and this would be the mid-70s. And that studio was called Paragon Recording. No longer exists, but some incredible sounding records came out of there, which today the sound really lives on with these records because it was so spectacular. And I'm thinking particularly of the records by the Ohio Players, which were almost all done at Paragon, and the early records by Styx. And you hear these records today, you even hear Love Roller Coaster or Skin Tight or Fire by the Ohio Players. One of the qualities that keeps that catalog alive is it sounds so incredible. They just sound so timely today. They sound like they were recorded yesterday. And Paragon was a great studio and a great education for me, and that was my first exposure to real record recording, and I had a wonderful mentor, an engineer named Barry Mraz, who did these records for Styx and the Ohio Players. And looking back at my own career, I have to say that having a mentor of incredible skill like that was about the luckiest thing that could have ever happened to me. Working with this fellow Barry Mraz for a year, I actually think I learned 95% of what I know about recording in that year. So that was a break that I just thank my lucky stars. The Ohio Players, of course, were key in this market. In those days, it's very different from today. I think today we've probably gone through at least 2 complete revolutions in the evolution of music recording technology. In the mid-70s, the good studios were distributed around the country, and there was not one in every town. Today, there's a studio not only in every town, there's a studio in everyone's bedroom, in everyone's laptop. But in the mid-70s, you had to travel to the big city to find a decent studio. So the Ohio Players, who lived in Dayton, Ohio, and in the mid-70s they were the #1 group in the country. They had the #1 album, each of their albums, Fire and some of these other albums, Body Heat, #1 in the country. But they had to come to Chicago from Dayton to work in a top-flight studio. By the mid-80s, that had really changed, and there were studios in every city, not just the biggest cities. Every city had SSL consoles and Neve console-equipped studios. And so there was possibly a little different dynamic now. Every market had studios. And of course now I mentioned a third transition. Now you can get, after we've made the transition across the digital divide. Now there's digital recording equipment that literally is available on your laptop that, frankly, a talented person can do a very, very credible and creative and artistically satisfying recording on. I did mention some records that sound like they were recorded recently, so they can still be played, so they're still on the radio. You'll still hear Led Zeppelin in every city in the country every day. And yet there are records from the same era that those records recorded that you won't hear anymore because they sound so dated in the recording. I'll give you another example. The Doors. The Doors, they're still played today. The creative people that made those records, Bruce Botnick, tremendous engineer, Paul Rothchild, tremendous producer, with some great musicians, those records still are on the radio, still are in the air, people still respond to them, and one of the reasons is because they sound so great. When those Doors records were made, it's the same time that the records by the Byrds were made, that the Jefferson Airplane were made. Very important records of their time. I love those Byrds records. They don't sound as good. Why? I think it's the people. I think it's what Bruce Botnick heard in his head and what he went for in the recording studio and made sure he got. I'll give you another example. One that everybody knows today. Smells Like Teen Spirit. This record changed the entire landscape of music for many reasons. The song was great, the arrangement was great, the timing for this sentiment was great, but it also happens to sound incredible. From the first two bars, it comes on and you hear it and you want to hear more. You want to hear more. It sounds so powerful, and that effort that Bruce Vig, who recorded that, produced that, the musicians, the sounds they were getting on their instruments, a great mix. These things stay with a recording, and it's really the kind of contribution that people in my profession, the engineers and the producers, can bring to a session, can bring to artists, that really is at the essence of our relationship with artists when they are recording, that if it makes a big difference and we get something out there that helps an artist communicate, it can help a song, it can help a recording live on for decades. Whereas one that doesn't quite have that snap may have its moment if it's a great song or a great performance, but it may not have as long a life. Your artists or your clients, you're there because of them in a recording studio. They have to control, at the end of the day, how you're working, the nature of the process. Every artist is a little different. See if I can give you some examples of this. Okay. When I was an assistant engineer working on the Ohio Players records, I remember one day Sugar, who was the lead singer and guitar player and one of the main songwriters of the band, asking me to get his guitar. And I said, sure, what case is it in? And he looked at me, he waited about 3 beats, and he goes, I don't know, I've never seen the case. And right then I knew, okay, I'm in a different kind of group here. I got it. And it was one of my first introductions to artists who were going to choose to behave like stars. Cool. Learned my lesson. We moved on. Got to work with them. They were great people and terribly talented, but they were stars. We had Michael Jackson in our studios in Chicago doing a record that R. Kelly produced a number of years ago. I want to say 8 or 10 years ago. Michael at the time was, of course, one of the biggest stars in the history of the music business. The most polite, courteous, charming. When he came in, hello to the receptionist, hello to everybody, and then went about his business, warmed up, did his vocal exercise, and got to work. And I just saw that, and I realized how instantaneously he enlisted the help of everybody, from the receptionist to the assistant engineer to the runner, just by being courteous. And so everybody's different. If you're meeting an artist for the first time, you've been thrown on a session, of course you don't know how it's going to go. some sessions where it's a single artist are different from bands. When there are bands, there are intricate dynamics. We did at Chicago Recording Company, which was my home studio for many, many years, and I was the general manager of Chicago Recording Company for about 15 years. We did a long, involved project with the Smashing Pumpkins. Their biggest selling project, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, was all recorded at CRC with Flood was producing, and Alan Moulder was involved, and there's some great production people, and Billy Corgan and his colleagues in that band. And it was a brilliant band at the height of their powers, but there were a lot of dynamics in the band. I mean, when you're in a band, you're married to 4 other people. You're married to 5 other people. It couldn't be more complicated. And if you're part of the production team, you have to kind of stay on the sidelines of that. You have to be very aware that that band was a band before they showed up at the studio. They're going to be a band when they leave. You have to help them, but you really can't allow yourself to be drawn into the marriage. You're not part of the band. And at that moment, it was a band, like all bands I see, where they are a family, and they may fight, and they may love, and they may hug, and they may yell, but we have to stay on the sidelines. We can't referee that stuff. We've really gone into some new space in the last 2 years. We produce a tremendous amount of live music webcasting. And when I say we, my production company is called Third Wave Productions, and I have 2 partners. My partners, Terry and Stephen. And we've took our focus on surround sound and DVDs and extended it into the world of live webcasting. Now, we all know that there's audio outside the recording studio. There's audio outside recording the Rolling Stones or Bruce Springsteen. There's audio for film. There's audio for television. There's audio for commercials. There's audio in every kind of media. So as people look at being part of pro audio, I always tell them to think broader than just the music recording studio. That's a pretty narrow slice of what professional audio really can involve and the opportunities that are available for people. One of the ones that we've jumped into with both feet is web-delivered music. And this is just the beginning, because there are going to be opportunities to deliver a lot of content. We're already seeing it going to cell phones. Phone casts is what we call that, phone casting. We're going to see it in something called IPTV, which is Internet Protocol Television. You're going to see some of the big companies that already have a wire into your house, whether it's through your DSL box or your cable modem box, deliver television down that line called IPTV. So there's a whole bunch of new delivery systems out there, and we're all aware of web-based stuff. We got involved with a number of festivals. We've done all the audio production for the Bonnaroo Festival for the last 4 years. And Bonnaroo is the biggest festival in the country. It gets about 90,000 people. It's in June in Tennessee. It's been very successful. And we started working with them. This is year 5 of them. We started working in year 2 at Bonnaroo. Bonnaroo has 5 stages. There's music there from noon to 4 a.m. every day. It's really a special destination. And we were recording all the audio, and the Bonnaroo promoters made it available for download. About of the 60 or 70 bands that perform there, they would make available 30 full sets that you could buy after the festival. So if you want to go back and get the Dave Matthews and Friends set, or the Medeski, Martin and Woods set, or Ben Harper's set after the festival, about half the festival's there. And it's not front of house mixing. It's recorded multi-track by one of our teams, and then we remix it after the festival. And then we make sure the artists get to hear it and approve it. In some cases, an artist may say, hey, we have some notes. We'd like the piano louder in this song. We think the bass is low in that song. We love that. We get some feedback. So we get artist-approved mixing. And then it's available for purchase by the promoters of this festival, which has really been kind of visionary of them. I have to give them tremendous props for this, so that if you were there and you saw a great set by Humphreys McGee, who played at midnight for 4 hours, you can get the whole 4-hour set. Buy it, download it, burn it to CD, keep it. There's artwork with it. We started doing that, and we found that to be a real great extension of what people were used to. And it had the benefits of being remixed and artist approved. Last year, we started with 3 festivals: Lollapalooza, Austin City Limits Festival. Both these are giant festivals. And then a new festival that was in Las Vegas last Halloween called Vegoose. All these were multi-stage festivals. Last year, we produced not only this audio recording, we produced a video production live that was available in real time at sponsored by AT&T, this particular one, at their site called The Blue Room, which is a music site. And you could see these festivals live for about 12 hours a day. So we were producing a live webcast with switched multi-camera production at each of these stages. Artists cleared that wanted to participate, and you could see and hear a live performance by artists from these festivals. This year we're going to be doing it in 2 weeks at 3 weeks at the Bonnaroo Festival. It'll be 12 hours a day. So last year we did about 75 or 80 hours of a live webcast from these festivals. This year it'll be over 100. And then after the festivals, they archive a couple songs from each of these performances that people can go back and see. And that's kind of taken our production experience in a new direction, because now we're not only have shooters on stage, audio, multi-track audio being mixed live. We have a director doing a live line cut, marrying that to the audio, bringing it to a webcast control room where we're switching live, adding lower third graphics to describe who's playing right then, previewing who's coming next, transitions. Essentially, it's live television production. It's exactly what it is. And then we satellite it up to Yahoo or whoever else is going to be carrying this for the client. Chicago is a great place to live. It's an incredible city. It's a wonderful part of the country. Don't tell anyone. We don't want anyone else moving here. What I think has sort of happened in music scenes is it truly doesn't matter as much where you live. The industries, the major label industries, are still consolidated in Los Angeles and New York and Nashville. But artists are everywhere. And as I think I said earlier, you used to have to go to another location to record. Now, for the most part, people record generally, frequently, in an area where they live or where their patrons' record companies operate. And you can record quality audio anywhere, in any city. Chicago has plenty of opportunities for that and has very vibrant musical communities in many genres. Obviously, blues is still got a great history and a great legacy here, but that's really the historical. In terms of contemporary activity, there's a tremendous amount in both hip-hop and rock, very active. Best example would be Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy are from Chicago. I mean, they're from right up the road here. They're from Wilmette. Great band. Great band. So there's still a very good scene that's nurturing artists here, a good club scene, a good developmental scene. There isn't a large number of managers in Chicago, but there's great booking agents and great showcase clubs. And as I say, Fall Out Boy is a great example. On the hip-hop side, obviously this community nurtured probably the 2 biggest artists in hip-hop today, Kanye West and Common. I mean, these are great artists that have now developed international followings, and they all cut their teeth here, and there's very active scenes in both of those genres. The blues clubs are still very active. It's still the home of one of the premier blues labels, Alligator Records. Blues, like jazz, is just one of the greatest contributions to our culture that you can imagine. I mean, but I'm not so sure that they're current. They're in the case of the blues, it seems to be harder and harder to get young artists to commit themselves to that genre is going to be what they want to express themselves in. You see blues as and I mean that's understandable. I mean we saw it in the British invasion when I was a kid, all these English artists embracing the music of Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and Robert Johnson and making that part of their music. Obviously Cream and Eric Clapton and the Rolling Stones and even the Beatles. This was essential vocabulary for them. Not so sure it is today for artists coming up. Is the blues, do you hear that in the music of, would you hear it in Nirvana or Smashing Pumpkins? Do you hear it in Fall Out Boy? Not so sure. Not so sure I hear it, but it may be part of their vocabulary, but it's not the same. And yet, I see jazz, the most encouraging thing I see for jazz is it's now, and this isn't Chicago, this is everywhere. Jazz is taught and offered as part of the curriculum in band curriculum at the middle school and high school level all over the country. And that's been a great breakthrough, where it used to be a kind of concert band repertoire that they would teach in the schools. Now they teach and offer jazz repertoire in what used to be concert bands. There's jazz bands and big bands in all the high schools, and that's been a great breakthrough in making those arrangements and that repertoire available to young people. Now, if they stay with music, that's part of their education. In hiring new people coming in as interns, as assistant engineers, etc., I've had success finding quality people who are graduates of some of the recording schools, but I don't think that's the only way in. I certainly think that the only way into this kind of expertise is to just get started. Now, it used to be that to build a quality recording studio and equip it at a competitive level was out of the reach of an individual. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, $1 million, build a studio. A recording console, a top-tier recording console, world class, costs $600,000 or $700,000. That's out of the reach of everybody, unless you're in the commercial studio business. That's changed. That's no longer necessary. You can start getting multi-track DAW systems, whether it's Pro Tools or a competitive system to that, for you can be up and running for a couple $1,000s with a very high quality complement, and you can start recording. I don't think that makes you an engineer. I don't think it makes you an engineer until you're really doing good work. Occasionally people ask me, what does it take to be a producer? Well, the flip answer is you just call yourself a producer. You know, if you think you're a producer, I guess you're a producer. How many ways are there to produce a record or a webcast or a DVD, or as many ways as there are producers? Everybody approaches it different. The combination of creative people in every project is different. But in terms of educating yourself to being a good recording engineer, this takes some time, and it takes really. I can even say that better. I can quote one of the real deans of recording engineering. One of the greatest all time, one of the guys in the pantheon, is Bruce Swedien, and I think people still see him around and see his name. Of course, he did all the classic Michael Jackson records and Quincy Jones and many, many things. One of the true, real veterans. Bruce has a great line about record engineering. He always says, record engineering is easy after the first 10,000 hours. And so it's like a lot of things. You just have to pay your dues and set up the mics and record them and get them properly balanced. There's two clusters of areas where I think record engineers need to really focus their energy. One is out in the studio, putting up different mics, placing them and moving them, getting out of your chair, walking into the studio, making changes, making adjustments, doing it properly, doing it under the radar of the artist, but improving the sound you're recording by making the adjustments every hour. And the second thing that is really the critical piece is learning to balance. And learning to balance means you have to sit at the desk, whether you're doing it at your DAW workstation with a mouse. Not my favorite way to balance. I still think having moving faders is helpful. Having faders is helpful, but that could be my old school experience speaking. And learning to balance. You have to sit there and take 24 tracks, take 40 tracks, take 60 tracks, and balance them into a musically satisfying blend. This is easy to describe and not as easy to do. There are a tremendous amount of C+ to B recordings out there. It's pretty easy to get a B. You got to be pretty tone deaf to fall below B today. But it's just as hard. I don't hear a lot of A and A+ stuff. I don't hear a lot of stuff where the actual sound and balance of this tickles your ears and just you got to hear it again and you want to hear it again because it just is so pleasing, so hooky, so compelling. And when you listen to recordings, I think it's the balance that captures your attention. And it doesn't matter what genre you're talking about, if you're talking about Kanye West or a Led Zeppelin record or a classic Michael Jackson record, because I mentioned Bruce Swedien. You go back and you listen to any Michael Jackson record, there are 100 things going on that musical track, the whole song, and you can hear them all. And you can hear them in a proportion and a balance that just sounds, you can't imagine hearing it another way. You listen to that and you go, boy, I really don't think I could imagine the snare drum being louder or that little percussion thing. I don't need it louder, but it's there. I got it all. It's all helping me. Because bands, hip-hop artists, people doing beat tracks, solo artists are everywhere. They're in your school. They're in your church. They're in your town. They're there. If you want to be recording, you can be recording. It's almost like being in a band today. I mean, until recently, to get anywhere as a band, you needed the president of Sony Music or Warner Brothers to bless you. You don't need that anymore. You want to make a CD? Go make a CD. Not that hard. How good it's going to be is up to you, but you don't need anyone's permission. Same with getting into being a recording engineer or a producer. Digital workstations are an entry level. You can get some for hundreds of dollars. For a couple $1,000s, you can get into quality workstations. Some are Mac, some are PC, some are bi-platform. Pro Tools works on both platforms. There's a variety of PC-based ones. I'm a Mac guy, I'm a Pro Tools guy, but there certainly are competitive ones other than that are available. Pro Tools seems to be the most ubiquitous. They're everywhere, and they're certainly everywhere in the professional world. I find today, not just in music, but in television, in film, we're asked to deliver Pro Tools sessions. So I still think that is an important education for someone getting into that. But Pro Tools makes a product, a light product called LE, that is very easy to get into and very affordable. So now you're talking about a Mac or a PC. You're talking about a computer. The faster, the better. But all these can work natively on the computer for an entry-level person. You need an interface that has some mic pre's in it. Okay, you're starting with 2, but frankly, 2 isn't enough. You want to be able to get to the point where you can do multi-track recording, where you can put up enough mics to get a good drum balance plus a couple other instruments at one time. So it would certainly be advisable for entry-level engineers to reach for the point where they can record 8 to 12 to 16 simultaneous live mics. So they need the mic pre's and the interface to be able to do that. And then it's microphones. And the classic microphones, the classic tube microphones, cost thousands of dollars. And the classic condenser microphones are in the thousands. The vintage mics, you'll see classic mics going for $10,000 and more. But the fact of the matter is today that technology's changed a lot too. And there are wonderful sounding mics at $250. And if you need a couple of decent vocal mics, there's a couple of decent piano mics. If you're prepared to spend anywhere from $250 to $500, you have tremendous selection across 4 or 5 good manufacturers. And now you've pretty much done it. Now you have your recording system and some microphones, and you're building up your mic kit, and you're building up your recording ability. Even the mobile recording trucks, remote trucks, that world has changed. There are brilliant trucks out there. We use them, of course, on the Grammy show. We use the F&L truck, now the XM F&L truck. There's great mobile recording situations around all big cities. There's a couple of great guys here in Chicago, Tim Powell at Metro Mobile and Chris Shepard of C-Mix. But one of the new things that I'm starting to see in the last couple of years is you can do very competitive recording with what we call a fly pack system. You don't necessarily need to build it in a mobile truck anymore. So we, in some of our television productions, our music television productions, and our webcasting productions, will bring in a fly pack system, which is a 48-track mobile Pro Tools system. Dual, because in mobile recording at the professional level, you need a master and a backup. If the master crashes, Bono's only singing once. He's in front of 25,000 people. I'm not going to get him to do it again. Dave Matthews ain't doing it again. So you got to get it live. So a competitive live recording system has 2 recorders. And I see flypack systems now that are 2 Pro Tools systems, 48 tracks of high-quality mic preamps that can set up on the side of a stage, in a dressing room, under the stage, without bringing a whole recording truck in. That's becoming a more and more viable option, and it sort of speaks to the mobility of the new technology, but also the fact that it's more economical, and people can get into that business. The barriers for entry are lower because the technology is cheaper. So it's really just putting in the time. And I sometimes say this to people that are getting into the business as apprentices or interns, but it's also true if you're an assistant engineer or a young engineer out there too. If you're working somewhere and you're not being exposed to new stuff, you're not being having an opportunity to learn, to ask some questions, to upgrade your education, got to go find another internship, got to go find another apprenticeship. It's absolutely fair of the employer to expect you to contribute, do some errands, help out, do the chores around the place. That's fair. But in return, you need to expect to be exposed to some things that are going to help you in your professional education. I think it's really important for anyone who's getting into production to not look at one genre and one application. The watchword is multi-platform. If you like audio, and that's what turns you on, awesome. But there's audio for records, music, film, television, webcasting, phone casting, commercials. Next time you're at the movies, Friday night, you go to see Mission Impossible or you go see X-Men, just try and concentrate on how much you're actually hearing in 60 seconds of that movie. You're hearing the work of dozens of audio people who put together not just the recording of Tom Hanks or Hugh Jackman talking in the feature film. That audio was probably replaced later in post-production by an ADR engineer. There's one audio job. The whole musical score was scored and recorded later. But one of the most interesting places, and not everybody focuses on this, is the sound design and the sound effects scoring, which is a giant part of not just feature film production, but television production, and requires a tremendous amount of creativity and expertise. So sound effects scoring and sound design is a great avenue for anyone interested in audio. Uses the same Pro Tools platforms. If you get into music and you learn your Pro Tools skills and you decide to move into film or TV, those skills are transferable to all these different professions, all these different areas of production. So I often tell young people, keep your mind open. Don't just think about music, or don't just think about music for CDs, for albums. Think about music for film and television and commercial as well, because that opportunity may be more available to you, especially if you live in Miami or Philadelphia or someplace other than Los Angeles, Nashville, and New York. I'm so happy. I'm so lucky that I made a career in music. When I got out of school, I wanted to be next to music. I was not a good musician. My son is a good musician. I'm envious of him. He can play music. I'm not. I can't. I find music to be just the most rewarding thing in the world. When I get philosophical about this, I sometimes say things like, if you were to make a short list of the greatest things our species has ever contributed to this civilization, you might come up with medicine and architecture and things, but music's probably on the short list. Music is really great stuff. And to be able to be next to great musicians and be around when they're making music, I dig it.